Nita Shea, thanks for joining us. You're the director for the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. You just wrote an article about what's happening in Syria and the dangers to the Christian community. How would you describe what's happening in Syria right now for Christians?
Well, first of all, great to be with you today, Chris. Thank you for your interest in this issue. It's very important, as you know, because this Syria is part of the cradle of Christianity. In fact, the first community to be called Christians in the New Testament were Syrians. And they are facing more war. They're facing political chaos. They're facing being targeted and suppressed and subordinated by an Islamist jihadist regime that has taken control of their government. Their numbers have been dwindling over the years under Assad. From best estimates were 2 million in 2010 to 250,000, only 250,000 left today in Syria, according to the local leaders of the church there. And this, is dangerous this in turn is dangerous for Syria and the greater Middle East, because these Christian communities have been moderators. They have been mediators with the West. They have been mediators with different Islamic forces. And if they leave, which is what I think is going to happen, that the rest, as they become more vulnerable, they will leave.
Yeah. What are you hearing from some of the Christian leaders inside Syria, particularly in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's been a mix, and it's you have to understand their position. Some of them have been extremely positive, like the Latin bishop of Syria. He has said that this is a new sunrise in Syria under this government, and that they have made promises to him that they would not touch their property. Now, this is not really credible to me, or probably to him, because he's a hostage, essentially. He's at the mercy of these government of this new regime of jihadists. Actually, this is HTS is the leading force in the government now in Syria now. That is a designated terrorist group by the United States, by the UN, by the UK, and others. So that is who is now at the top of their government, and he is under them. He's committed to maintaining a presence of Christians in this area, so ideologically committed. So as are all Christian leaders, really. So it's very difficult for him. Others have said that this is a dangerous moment. One leader from the Church of the East, which is a very ancient church in Syria, in that region, says that this is very pronounced fear among the Christians now. The fear is very pronounced right now. There's just so much uncertainty, but this leader of the HTS terror group that's now in charge, his name is al-Golani. He was a radical Palestinian born in Saudi Arabia from the Golan Heights. He not only was a member of the al-Qaeda branch in Syria, the al-Nusra Front, it was called, changed his name to HTS, rebranded. He founded it. He founded al-Qaeda's branch in Syria. This is being portrayed by the press as he had a break with al-Qaeda. No, it was a strategy of al-Qaeda to go national, to go on a national level. They saw what was happening to ISIS. It had global ambitions, and it had one brand, and it was a target by the West, by the rest of the world, frankly. And they decided to adapt. Al-Qaeda adapted at that point and broke off into national franchises. And he was the head of the franchise of Syria.
Al-Golani is saying that he wants to implement Sharia law. What does that mean for Christians?
Yes, well, there are varying degrees, but all of them make Christians second-class citizens, if you can even call them citizens, second-class subjects, really. They will have to they will have to conform with Muslim laws, Islamic law. That means that they will be restricted in what they can say, how they can pray, where they can pray. They will be restricted, and women will be very restricted in their dress, in particular. But also, they may end up. We don't know how radical this is going to be. He's been radical. This Golani has been radical most of his adult life. So it's quite possible that they'll go in the Taliban direction, where women are enshrouded and sequestered. The UN's latest reports on Afghanistan women is that they've been erased from public life. And what that means that they have to have, not only are they excluded from schools and education beyond sixth grade, and from the marketplace, they can't have jobs outside their homes, but they have to be accompanied by a male guardian everywhere they go, even to the grocery store or to the park. So they are basically confined to their homes unless they have a male guardian who will take them there to outside.
What would you say about what particularly Al-Golani is saying right now in public?
Yeah, I take his words worth a grain of salt. He's trying to consolidate his control right now. He does not want trouble from the West. He doesn't want the West to fear him or in his Jihadi army. So he is not being sincere, just like the Taliban wasn't. You have to look behind the words to see what people are doing and what the situation is and what the reasonable response to that situation is for the people who live there.
Yeah, I've noticed within days he just changed so direct. As you said, he's changed his garb. No longer the military man.
Yes.
And he obviously he's very shrewd, and
they've learned a lot of lessons from ISIS. They saw how ISIS was really crushed by our forces and the Kurds and the Iraqi forces, of course. But they were crushed, and they were had established the caliphate in Raqqa and had the slave markets and all of that, and they were on top of the world. They thought, and suddenly they're gone. And so he adapted, and he has done that repeatedly. ISIS adapted as a organization to go from a central command to these national chapters and disassociate, so they didn't have to defend each other. If one was wiped out, they could continue in another place. And now he's adapting again and appealing to the West. He's trying to show the West now. He's not so much concerned with his base. He's concerned at this point with Western support for reconstruction and particularly lifting sanctions. That's what he has come out and asked for. And that's what some of these church leaders are saying now. We have to lift sanctions right away. I think that would be a mistake to do that, because that's one lever we have over him.
How would you recommend that the West, the U.S. in particular, how should they react in this in diplomacy and policy?
Should stand up for these Christians. They should be a voice for them. They shouldn't, particularly, I think, bring pressure against Turkey, who is our NATO ally and who has supported HTS and is considered by the Christians that I've talked to there as Christian leaders as a manager and an influencer of this rebellion that has taken place. And one of the things that drove a lot of Christians out are the well, they lack protection. They don't have militias of their own. And many of them flocked to the northeastern part of Syria that was protected, where they found protection under the Kurdish militias there and American-backed troops and there. So Turkey is now has the Kurds in their sight. They've given them an ultimatum to lay down their arms or to leave. And this will have dire consequences. I've seen numbers that I don't know what you've seen, Chris, but 120,000 Christians live up in that northeast area under the protection of the Kurds, and where they have been relatively free. And if they, we saw what happened with ISIS when they came through Syria and Iraq, northern Syria, northern Iraq, they claimed that they imposed a jizya, a tax on the people of the book, that is the Christians, because there were no Jews left. But it really was a ransom, and they were told to pay money or else they would be killed. And when they kept raising that sum, and to the point where the Christians who were not well-to-do couldn't pay anymore, the villagers, and then they demanded that they give over their daughters instead. And so that's when many of these Christians left from 2014 on. But it's also, this general climate of uncertainty, and Al-Qaeda and ISIS are rivals. The Al-Golani had some connection with ISIS. I think he was a member of it at one point, or affiliated with it. And but they're rivals now, and so it's quite likely there would be fighting between them. Because there's a large presence of ISIS there. They're in prisons, in detention camps. They and their family members, their children now are teenagers that were born then, and or approaching the teen years, and they're. It's a very perilous situation. I think it's an existential threat for the community, maybe not for individual Christians, but for the communities, the Christian community at large, combination Orthodox, which is the largest Catholic and Protestant. As they get smaller, they become more vulnerable, and nobody really wants to raise a family in that environment, and they will leave unless their leaders want them to stay, and some are diehards and have a commitment to the region because of its significance to Christianity and to their own families. Many of these people, the majority, are descendants of the earliest Christians, when you think about it. This is first century church. Since Islam arrived in the 7th century, there have been virtually no conversions. That would mean death for apostasy for the Muslim who converted. So there have been very few conversions, relatively few. And so these are descendants from the first century church. And so some are committed to stay and may even accept martyrdom, or this horrible situation of being discriminated against, being repressed constantly, being scorned, being thought of as inferior infidels, and hated, actually, when they could have an option to leave for the West.
Yeah. So talk about this northeast Syria, which is a sort of an autonomous region.
That's right.
Can you explain what's happening there and what that is?
So that is an autonomous region because the Kurds were able to take part of this. Syria is a fractured country, has been fractured for a number of years, with Turks occupying some of it, and in the northeast as a buffer zone, and then the Assad government holding part of it, and then Idlib being under the control of HTS for about 8 years. So the Northeast was the Kurds and American troops, and there still is American presence there, about 900 troops left. And they have their a free system. It's a pluralistic system, and meaning that there are Christians involved in public life, and there are Christian churches. I think that, maybe half the Christian population, as much as half the Christian population left in Syria are living there now. And there are also prisons holding thousands of ISIS jihadis. And that is, if that region is then, if the Kurds are driven out and the Kurdish militias are driven out, what is to become of those prisoners? And if the U.S. leaves, the same thing. There's large oil wells in that region that the troops are, I think, trying to protect or keep from. They were trying to keep from Assad, which is a source of wealth. So for whoever's in charge of the government. So it's a very important region. I think the Kurds deserve protection and support, military, including military support. I think that, you asked about policy, and I think that this is why it's so important for the United States and the world, to the international community, to really, especially NATO, to tell our fellow NATO member, Turkey, to make peace with the Kurds, because what they're doing now is telling them to lay down their arms or to get out. And if they lay down their arms, then they become vulnerable too. Then they're at the mercy of either Turkey or the jihadis whom they've been fighting. And they have been involved in recent fights with HTS over Deir al-Zor. The Kurds captured it a few weeks or days ago, and then it was days later it was retaken by HTS in a skirmish. So again, this is part of the political uncertainty that is going to be so discouraging to the Christians. The Syrian Muslim population, the Sunni population, is jubilant now because their oppressor was Assad. But the Christians are extremely vulnerable now. Chris, they've been, the Christians were in Idlib, governance, where al-Golani was Amir, I guess, for 8 years or so. And the New York Times ran an article in 2 years ago, saying that there were 3 Christians left there. And they interviewed him, interviewed the man, and he said his brother and mother were there with him. He was 90 years old. So, maybe it was his wife. Oh, sorry, it wasn't his mother. It was his wife and his brother. He's 90 years old. And presumably he couldn't leave because of his age and frailty. And I know that the Latin bishop said, well, for the first time in 10 years, the church bells have rung in Idlib, when Golani conquered, took control of the government and overthrew Assad. So I think that that's very revealing too. There had been a Christian community there, and they all left. I mean, maybe the New York Times was wrong. It wouldn't be the first time, but at most there were 300, a community of 3, just hundreds, not thousands of Christians left in Idlib. And that tells you something, that they just don't want to live under that rule, because he has been ruling under Islamic law, under Sharia there in Idlib. And now he says that he intends to do the same in all of Syria. That he has, I think, been practicing deception. He has changed his military garb for Western suits, and has changed his name from the nom de guerre al-Golani back to his original name, Shea. And, he says he's completely reformed. But really, when have we seen a jihadi commander at the height of his triumph, at the very peak of his triumph, really remove his keffiyeh and say, and show to the world that he is, prove to the world that he is a pluralistic minded religious freedom champion. Never.
Yeah.
What we see in Afghanistan is probably what we're going to get there too, which is, the United States requested promises and got them from the Taliban that they would respect the rights of women. Now women in Afghanistan can't even leave their homes, without a male guardian, and wearing a burqa. So that was deception, and I think that he is having a major charm offensive PR campaign right now to get support from particularly the West.
Mm-hmm. Would you say, in terms of geography, would you say that in the western part of Syria right now, that is taken over by HTS, there are a number of Christians there. Now they can either leave or perhaps go to northeast Syria where they may find refuge, or they can stay or just leave the country altogether. Would you say that a lot of them are seeking to leave one way or the other, or one direction or the other?
I don't really know. It's early days still. There hasn't been I don't believe, a mass exodus. Everybody was in shock. It was a lightning strike. No one expected this to succeed, that these militants would take control and Assad would flee so quickly. So a lot of them are still making their plans, no doubt, and maybe even waiting to see under the influence of their leaders. But I know that there are some who are leaving and are waiting for the airport to reopen so they can take a plane out. Within the region, it's very difficult for them. They don't really have a safe haven in the Arab world at all. And, that's the language they speak. And that's where other churches are, of their denominations. But I think that they can get to the West somehow, because they have before.
Yeah.
There have been over 1 million, maybe even 1.5 million that have gone since 2010.
Yeah. How should people be praying now? How should Christians pray for their brothers and sisters inside Syria?
Yes, they should pray for their security, their peace of mind, for the continuation of their ancient communities, for the strength and optimism and hope. They should also pray for the international powers, especially the United States, to speak up for them, to speak up to our NATO ally, Turkey, so that they might have take advantage of that safe haven in the northeastern part of Syria and stay in their homeland. They should pray that Golani has a change of heart, a true change of heart, and that the international community, including the Gulf states and the rest of the Arab world, communicates that to him, that there should be an inclusive society, that Christians and Jews belong in the Middle East. They have been there for thousands of years, and that there should be peace, and peace will bring prosperity for all.
Yeah. Nina, would you feel comfortable praying for us and praying for them?
Sure. Dear Lord, as we approach the celebration of your nativity 2,000 years ago, our minds turn to your people, your churches in the Middle East, in the cradle of Christianity, and to the people who were the first communities, who were called the first Christians. These churches descended from those people. Please remember them at this time of year. Please bring peace and a sense of peace and confidence and courage. Do not to be frightened, not to fear, into their hearts, and into the hearts of their leaders and their authorities who have control over the future direction of their country and their lives. It is important to the peace for the world and the region that Christians remain in the Middle East. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, Nina, Shea, thanks so much for your analysis of what's going on and getting the word out so people can be informed, for policy can change, and people can be praying for their brothers and sisters inside Syria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.